So today's Monday, and it is actually my first day of Clerkships. Now, I haven't really gotten into my official Clerkships like internal medicine, family medicine, that kind of stuff, but I did finish my preclinical curriculum, and right now I'm in something called a transitional clerkship. So last week I took my final test of my preclinical curriculum, finished our neuro and psychiatry block, and then I start my internal medicine block the first week of December. So in between this time, my school does something called a transitional clerkship. It spans pretty much the whole month of November, so it's like 3.5 weeks if you exclude our Thanksgiving break. And the main purpose is to just brush up on a lot of important topics that we covered over the past 1.5 years and make sure they're fresh in our brains for when we start clerkships. So we'll have lectures that will cover high yield topics and stuff like pharmacology, different kinds of imaging, antibiotics, because that's a huge topic and really important for when you're in the clinical setting. The other part of transitional is to learn a lot of the logistics about clerkships. So, since starting medical school, we've kind of just been sitting in a classroom studying like we have most of our lives, but the environment and how your day is organized in clerkships is very different. So instead of just kind of throwing us to the wolves with that, they want to give us an extended period of time to learn how we're going to be spending our time and set us up to be most successful. So we have sessions telling us like what rounding is like, the structure of our clerkships, how to study for our shelf exams. So a lot of really helpful stuff, and I'm very glad that my school does this. I know a lot of other schools don't. They'll have, a few days, maybe a week of something similar to what we do, but I think having it spread out and being this comprehensive is really gonna let us shine right when we start our clerkships. So like I said, today's Monday, it's the first day of our transitional clerkships, and we had a few really good sessions already. Our first few ones were kind of like orientation-y. We went over the typical structure of our different clerkships. So we have 7. A lot of schools will do 8, but our emergency medicine clerkship is sort of longitudinal. So basically, we'll have 1 or 2 ER shifts in all of our other blocks. My sequence is going to be internal medicine, surgery, family medicine, neurology, psychiatry, pediatrics, and OBGYN. And then interspersed throughout that whole year will be different ER shifts. For all of our clerkships, we'll be in the hospital 5 or 6 days a week, and sometimes we'll have a day or a half day off to do like core curriculum. So sometimes it's different Zoom lectures, sometimes we have to come to the school to do different simulation labs with high-tech mannequins. So overall, it's very different from what we're used to. Pretty much since we started medical school, all of our days have been 8 to 12 or 8 to 1 and just lecture. But there's a lot more moving parts, and there's going to be a lot more planning and sort of self-directed learning. So after that, we had a session on note writing and presentations, 2 just absolutely essential skills for clerkships and also life as a physician, no matter what you do. We already had a lot of sessions on these topics, but I think it's just so important to keep hammering home the main points of how to give a good presentation and how to write a note properly. These are 2 things that we're going to be graded on, so the more practice we have, the better. And then finally, we had an EKG review. That was our last session of the day, and that was actually really helpful because a lot of us haven't thought about EKGs in months. Our cardio block, I think, was like pretty much all of May, so it's been many, many months since we had to worry about EKGs at all. It was taught by an emergency medicine physician, which was actually really nice because he kind of simplified everything. Our first EKG lecture was taught by an electrophysiologist, so definitely an expert in that topic, but a lot of the stuff is kind of going over our heads, so having it explained again by an ER physician who kind of dumbed it down and made things a lot more simple, I think was really helpful and a nice refresher on that topic. I'm very excited to be leaving behind preclinical and moving into clerkships. This is the reason that we all came to medical school, is to be in the hospital and see patients. It is a little stressful though, we're going into a new environment. I have to move, go to hospitals I've never been to before, and do a lot of things for the first time. Also, on top of that, we're actually sort of graded now. My school's preclinical curriculum is strictly pass-fail, so as long as you hit a certain threshold on your tests, you pass the class, and it doesn't matter if you got a 70 or a 100. That's becoming a lot more common for medical schools in the preclinical curriculum, but the clinical curriculum, the rotations are usually still graded. It's not really an ABC format, but it's something similar. My school, we have honors, high pass, pass, and fail. So now we have that added pressure of really getting sort of a letter grade for our rotation. The grading of clerkships is kind of a confusing and convoluted process, so I won't get into that right now. But while it is exciting to be moving into the clinical sphere, our rotations probably are going to be a lot more stressful than our preclinical years. Alright, so it is now Thursday, and a lot of stuff has happened in the past few days. So Tuesday morning we had one-on-one coaching where we went over some notes and different presentations that we had based on our OSCE last week. We did it with a clinical skills faculty that we've been working with since day one. So we read over our notes together, looked at a recording of our OSCE encounter, and then we had to present to the patient. This is really similar to the kind of feedback that we're going to get on Clerkships, where we'll give a note to one of our residents or an attending, and they'll tell us where we went wrong, where we could do better. And then also just presenting to the team is something that's going to happen every single day. So I think having that one-on-one coaching was really helpful and starting to get us in the groove of our interactions with the team are going to be like. Aside from the one-on-one coaching, we also had a presentation small group that was like a little bit more conversational. The preceptor just giving us general advice. People did read parts of presentations, but then we would kind of like talk as a group and dissect things that they did well and things that they could improve upon. That was nice because it was with faculty that I've never really interacted with before, so getting different people's perspectives is really helpful, because when you're on rotations, you're not going to be working with the same people every single day. Teams change, your attendings, residents, everyone sort of rotates in and out. So hearing different people's perspectives is going to get us used to that process. Then we also had a session on mental health in Clerkships. Burnout is a huge topic in medicine, and honestly, it starts in medical school. While we all have been working hard studying for countless hours on end, it's still nothing compared to what it's going to be like when we actually start working in the hospital. We're gonna have much longer days and come home and still have to study on top of it. We're gonna see a lot of sick patients and hear a lot of sad stories. So I'm really glad my school had this session, just sort of emphasizing the fact that we understand that you guys are about to go through a pretty transformative and heavy experience, and just trying to emphasize the importance of talking to people and reaching out when you need help. So then yesterday, Wednesday, we had a 2-hour medical imaging lecture. This was a pretty high yield review of chest and abdominal CTs and x-rays, which are things that we are going to be looking at all the time, especially on our surgery rotation. You're going to have to get really good at reading these different imaging techniques. So we had a great radiologist come and give the lecture. We had sort of a refresher on how to identify different structures on CT and the different views and everything, and then just kind of covered a lot of different common pathologies after that. It was really nice to go back, especially and do the chest stuff, because once again, we haven't done a lot of that in many, many months, throwing back to our pulmonary and cardio unit. More recently have our GI class, so a lot of the abdominal stuff was familiar, but still really nice to get a refresher on a lot of the common things that we're going to be seeing next month. Then after that, we had an evidence-based medicine for Clerkships, where we basically talked about the best ways to look up information when we're on Clerkships. So I've heard a lot that one of your jobs as the medical student is to look up questions that the team has and, come up with an answer, whether it's, picking between 2 medications or different sort of best practices for management of a certain condition. Medical student has the most downtime, so it sort of falls on you to look up the answers to those questions that arise throughout the day. And it's not good enough to just Google something and click the first link. As medical professionals, we need to be really good about sorting through all the information on the internet and finding what is good information or not. So we talked about a bunch of different resources that are commonly used. Again, that was really helpful because it's something that I never really thought about. Having a few good websites or journals to go to whenever I have a question, it's going to save me a lot of time and make sure what I'm looking up and presenting to my team is accurate. And then earlier today, we had an orientation to the hospital day, so similar to things that we've done in the past, but more walking us step by step through a day in the hospital. Now, they made a lot of caveats that things are going to be different based on what service you're on and what hospital and all that. But in general, they broke down sort of what we're going to be doing all day. So pretty much every medical student's day starts with something called pre-rounding, where it's the first thing you do when you walk in the hospital. You look up all your patients that you're following, see if anything happened overnight, look at their vitals, see if they got any new medications, and then you'll go see them. Go check up on them, see how they're doing, maybe do a physical exam. And all of this is to compile a presentation that you'll give on rounds to your attending and the rest of the team. Then after pre-rounding is rounding, which, like I said, usually it's ran by an attending or maybe a senior resident, and everyone goes around and talks about their patients and just sort of updates everyone. You know, this is the stuff that happened overnight. They're improving. I think they can go home tomorrow, or maybe something bad happened. You need to change management. It's sort of just getting everyone on the same page and making sure the plans that the medical students and residents come up with make sense. Rounding can last a while based on what specialty you're on. You know, usually surgery is very fast because you've got to get into the OR, but internal medicine can be really long because there's a lot of things to consider with the patients and you need to really work through everything. Then after rounds, the day is just kind of like completing miscellaneous tasks, you know, following up on the orders that the attending and residents put in. If the patient needs a CT, like making sure they get the CT and then reading it, maybe going down to radiology and saying, hey, like, saw this patient's imaging came back, can you explain to me what you saw? Then if the ER has a new admit, you might go see them and admit the patient, take a really detailed strain physical exam, and then that's a new patient for you. You're following them throughout their whole hospital stay. So that was a really nice session to sort of prep us on what we're going to be doing every day. After that, we had a pelvic and breast exam training. It was taught by our OBGYN clerkship director, and we just learned different parts of the pelvic and breast exam on models. So learned how to do a pap smear, do the bimanual pelvic exam, learn different techniques for doing a breast exam. So overall, really informative stuff that I have never really had experience with. And then the last thing that we did today was we had a clerkship director panel. So we had, I think, 6 of our 8 clerkship directors here for a panel to talk about their clerkship and answer any questions that our students had. So that was super helpful to hear directly from them what their clerkship is going to be like and what the expectations are. The surgery clerkship director is great, but he not really sugarcoat things about how tough it's going to be and how many hours we're going to work. All the clerkship directors were super nice and just got me excited to go through each of their different rotations. Alright, so it is now Sunday. Friday was actually a pretty cool day. We got to do a lot of stuff, not just like sit there and lecture and learn. So first thing that I did, I had a simulation that was all about acutely ill patients. So we had 3 cases of that today. We worked in groups. So the first one was a cardio case where the patient came in with palpitations, just really didn't feel good. So had to look at their vitals, do a physical exam. We got an EKG to look at that, got a chest x-ray to see if they had any like pulmonary edema, got some basic labs, and then had to treat the patient. We always have a facilitator in the room who is sort of acting as the nurse, but then it becomes like a teaching experience halfway through where we have to talk through our thought process of why did we give that certain medication, what did we think was going on with the EKG to lead us down a certain path. So like I said, these are always good learning experiences, and it's good to put us in a stressful situation to see how we're going to respond, because we will be in those kind of situations when we start rotations. One of the main things they were trying to hammer home today was calling for help. It's one thing when it's just a mannequin in front of you, but when you're faced with a real life person who is decompensating, your first step should always be to call for help. Whether it's a nurse or a resident, your attending is around, someone needs to come help you because we have basically no experience, and the more eyes you get on the patient, the better. So like I said, our first case was a cardio case, pretty similar to ones that we've done in the past. Then we had a case that ended up being septic shock. So it was sort of an older patient who came in with altered mental status. Turns out they had a UTI, which was causing the altered mental status. It's something that is very classic, and we will see that all the time. So once again, nice that they're doing things to prepare us for very common conditions that we're about to see. For that one, we just had to make sure that we were giving the patient fluid and starting antibiotics. That one more relied on using the labs to figure out what was going on, whereas the cardio case was more so the EKG and the vitals. And then finally, our last one was actually an opioid overdose. It was a younger patient who had a leg trauma, got it surgically repaired, and then we were pre-rounding on them the next day, and they were really lethargic, couldn't really respond to us, so we checked their vitals. Their O2 sat was pretty low, and their respirations were incredibly low. So basically, we had to know how to reverse opioid overdose. The facilitator taught us about the coma cocktail. So when a patient comes in comatose and the EMS and no one really knows why or what might be going on, there's 3 things that you can give the patient that isn't really going to hurt them, but it can treat sort of common causes of a coma. So it's glucose, because hypoglycemia is a very common cause of a coma. Naloxone or Narcan, that would reverse an opioid overdose. And then finally thiamine, which is vitamin B1. So all these cases were really helpful. It was a lot less stressful than it has been in the past. Usually we do these on our OSCEs, so we're like being actively graded, and sometimes we're alone, so a lot more stressful and not really like a learning environment. So it was a nice change of pace, just overall a pretty good experience. Then after that, we did do something where we were sort of graded. We had to do a head-to-toe full physical exam on a standardized patient, and basically they want to make sure that we are solid on our physical exam skills before we move into rotation. We did this sort of same head-to-toe physical, I think, in our like 2nd or 3rd block, so it's been a while. We've been doing heart and lung and abdominal exams throughout, just based on the course that we're in, but stringing it all together, doing all the cranial nerves, heart, lung, abdominal, different parts of a musculoskeletal exam. It's a lot of stuff, so they want to make sure that we have all of that sort of committed to memory, because those are things that we're going to be doing every single day. So we had 25 minutes to do a head-to-toe physical. Like I said, it incorporates all of the cranial nerves, heart exam, lung exam, full abdominal exam to check all of the patient's pulses, do vitals like blood pressure and heart rate, and then some more musculoskeletal stuff like checking their gait, making sure their spine is in proper alignment, checking their motor strength for their upper and lower extremities. So it was a lot to get through in 25 minutes. I did miss a few things, but that's okay. I'm pretty sure I passed. As for next week, we have a lot of really exciting stuff going on. So tomorrow I actually am going to the hospital and I'm rounding. So one of the sort of biggest events during our transitional clerkship is we're able to go to the hospital and do a morning rounding with whatever team that we're starting with. So since I'm starting with internal medicine, I'm going to go on internal medicine rounds. I have to be at the hospital at 6:45 and I'll pretty much spend the whole morning there. I think this is going to be one of the most helpful experiences because it gives us an insight into what we're going to be doing every single day. And we're also going to be working with some of the 3rd years who have been doing this for a year, and they can kind of guide us and give us a bunch of tips on how to be successful. Also, a little later in the week, we have a hospital day simulation. I think how that's going to work is, we go and see a patient in the ER, evaluate them, sort of come up with a differential, have a plan, and then we'll go present that to our attending. Then we imagine it's the next day and we're pre-rounding on the patient and there's going to be some sort of like deterioration and we're going to have to respond to it. So once again, I think that's going to be a really nice experience and just putting us in situations that are going to happen all the time in clerkships. And then finally, at the end of the week, we have a skills workshop. We're going to be learning a bunch of essential skills like how to draw blood, how to place an IV, how to insert a catheter. So I'm pretty excited for that because while we have learned a lot of physical exam stuff, we haven't learned too many of those procedures. All right, well, that is going to do it for today's video. If you enjoyed, please be sure to leave a like below and subscribe if you want to see videos like this in the future. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next one.